Oh, and you're recording. All right, so spark plugs. Oops. I have, no, I do. I thought I had room. Spark plugs. Spark plugs. Oh, can we just cut it out? Provides a place for the high voltage to jump a gap and ignite the fuel air mixture. Do I need, huh?
No, we're done.
Yeah, let's have a good night. Don't go away mad. Provides a place. These are the things I should cut out. For high voltage. To jump a gap. Jump a gap. And ignite the fuel air mixture. All right, 3 major parts. Consist of 3 major parts. 3 major parts. You have the electrode, or electrodes. You have the ceramic insulator. And the metal shell. They are usually resistor type plugs. Are often resistor type plugs. And what the resistor is there for is that in didn't cover it. What happens is you want one good solid spark. You don't want one spark and then a couple of residuals. It tends to wear out the plugs, and because of the nature of the way ignition harnesses are, they actually act like a capacitor, which store electricity. They can store electricity. You get a spark and it's going to follow through. You don't want that. One good solid plug. So there's a resistor in there, and the resistor then blocks all of these other after sparks, which you don't need because the fuel air mixture is already lit off. So why wear out the spark plug needlessly? So you have this resistor in there. Now the funny thing about the resistor is it's in there, and depending on which manual you're reading, so you do have to do maintenance on the spark plugs, and of course if you do maintenance on the spark plugs, you have to use a spark plug maintenance manual. And then they've changed over the years. There was a time when they said nothing. Then there was a time when they came out and said, oh, there's a resistor in there and you should be checking the resistor. Then they didn't say it, and then come to find out all the resistors were bad anyway. So then this spark plug company was always replacing them because of the bad resistors. Anyway, so you just got to read the manual on the resistors. Some of them have you check them now. Some different types don't. But if it does tell you to check the resistor, you have to check the resistor. So resistors prevent after firing, which reduces burning of the and erosion of the electrodes. Funny, actually. Everything I wrote, I actually said without reading it. I'm doing it right here. So I'm not going to write this. Resistors prevent, well, I'll write that for you. It's for resistor prevents after firing. Or a second firing. And that reduces the burning and the erosion of the electrodes, because spark plugs don't last forever. And they're very expensive. The construction of the ignition wire is such that the shielding makes the harness act like a capacitor. What I mean by that is, when you look at the construction of the ignition wires, you've got a wire in the middle, and then it's surrounded. Oh, wait a minute. Rather than me draw a picture, I have a picture that will actually make some sense. I'm an amazing person. There we go. So we have the inner conductor. Then we have some shielding over that. Then on top of, You've got an insulator on top of that. On top of the insulator, then you have stainless steel braided wire, nickel-plated braided wire. And that, it greatly reduces the EMI, electromagnetic interference, but it also provides a wear anti-chafe and strength to the wire. Some wires you're going to see that braiding. Some of them, the braiding is bare. Some of it has like a clear silicone over top of it, so you can see it, but it's not conductive. And others actually put a very colorful silicone, heat resistant polymer coating. You can get it in custom colors, red, yellow, blue, stuff like that. So you have a wire with steel around the wire. So what does that sound like? A wire sounds like a capacitor. Piece of metal and a piece of metal. Two pieces of metal that are not touching each other but running great lengths. Sounds like a capacitor. So you have this capacitance, and the capacitor does what? Stores up energy. So you can store up energy and actually get multiple sparks, which you don't need or want. All right. There are different electrode types. We have the massive. And the massive will has 2, 3, or 4 ground electrodes. 1, 2. It can be a projected core, which isn't real common, or standard core. I'll put STD core. They are silver in color. And when I wrote this, I wrote they're about $30 each, but that price has gone up a little bit. But around, how much is a good automotive spark? When you go to AutoZone and they say, well, we've got the platinum, double platinum iridium.
$25.
13 for the really expensive ones?
Yeah, 25.
All right.
Really expensive.
Really expensive. Okay, so the price is up there. So normally it's what, about $1.50 or something?
Yeah, at Walmart, yeah.
Okay.
I get them like 2 or 3 for less than your
Okay, $2-3. Okay, you're going to spend at least $30 for one of these. I do have a time for a funny story, which is relevant. Well, it's relevant. Whether or not you think it's funny, I don't know.
Let's hear the story, Tim.
You're going to hear the story, if you like it or not.
Yeah, you got the funny part out of the way.
All right. I've oversold it. Never mind. I don't want to tell you to. All right. Okay.
Anxiety.
So these are the two massive, projected core, not projected core. Let me see if I can get. All right. So you can see this one right here and this one right here really well. So as a junior mechanic, we're at a place that General Aviation, where you tend to do a lot of annual inspections, 100-hour inspections, that type of thing. You can expect that your job will be doing the oil changes and wheel bearings and maintenance of the spark plugs. And so, being fresh out of school, I went to work for this place, and not a repair station. And so, yes, I was doing a lot of spark plugs. And the way they told me to do it was, you take the spark plug out, and we had an appropriate thing, and you have a little vibrator that goes inside here, and it knocks out all the clinkers, we call them. Get all the clinkers out, and then you would blast it. You're supposed to blast them with an appropriate blast media that's made specially for spark plugs. And then you set the gap. And the planes we were working on are pretty nasty. It's just one of those places where it's kind of lower end. And these would be all rusted and nasty looking. I said to the guy, that's pretty nasty and rusty looking. What do you want me to do? Well, take the whole spark plug, put it in the glass bead booth, and just blast the whole thing really well. Well, then what? Well, then you got to paint it. Can I have some paint? Sure. Gave me a can of Continental Gold paint, stuff we used to paint the engines. So I was painting them all up. All my spark plugs were beautiful. They were pretty. And back in those days, as an IA, you have to do a renewal every year. And now the local FA puts on something. It's been, and what they'll do is they'll bring in some relevant stuff and talk about stuff for 8 hours. So you go to these IA renewals. Well, back in those days, Aviol used to put on the show, and their show happened at Las Vegas or Reno. So so we were always going up to Reno for this thing and having fun. But anyway, I remember I sat in a seminar, and they'd have all these different seminars. You can pick whatever you want. They were huge. And so I went to one put on by Champion. And it was real interesting. Champion, they come out and they talk about maintenance things. Hey, how many of you guys are using erosion gauges? I've heard of erosion gauge. Well, erosion gauge, what you do is you gap this, and it's a tool that has a calibrated hole in it. And, huh?
How'd you calibrate it?
Came brand new with calibration certificate. And if this fits inside of this calibrated hole, you have to throw it away. Sorry, be back. I gotta go to the bathroom.
You missed it.
How did you calibrate the pen?
I read it.
I got lucky. Follow sport. So here it is, right here. This is not the one I got, but it's all right. It says gap plug to 0.016. If plug enters, scrap. What does scrap mean? Throw it away. It's a massive electrode, CT482 erosion gauge insert plug here, and it goes in there. I want you to take a good look at what that looks like right there. What does that look like? What shape is that center electrode? What? That is a perfect circle. I had no idea that these were actually circles. I had actually come to believe that all electrodes came out looking like that. Kind of like this.
Oh, so you guys are doing quality work over there then?
Well, hey, sometimes the truth is not good, but I want you to know. I thought they all looked like that, and I came back from this thing with my trusty erosion gauge, and guess what I did the next year? I sold a whole lot of spark plugs. So 2 lessons. 1, that is round when it comes out of the factory, and at some point you need to throw them away. 2, what color was I painting them?
Gold.
Continental gold. What color did I tell you these things were? Silver. If you have a gold spark plug, I should have just left it here. If you have a gold spark plug, well, it's right there. Can you tell that this is gold? Maybe you can't, but that's gold.
It's like a bronze.
It's a bronze gold color. This one up here in the upper left. If it is gold, there we go. What is the difference between the gold and silver? Oh, about $100. So I was painting in this color right here, which is a color code that tells you that is a fine wire expensive plug. So I didn't know any better. Hey, you live and learn, right?
Have you ever played with the porcelain on an automotive spark plug?
Don't make it nasty. No. Played with the porcelain?
Yeah, if you break a chip off.
I've prayed. Have I ever prayed to the porcelain?
If you break a chip off and toss it out that window will shatter.
I probably shouldn't break the windows here. All right. Okay, that's the massive, the fine wire. Fine wire. Then there's the fine wire ones. Have 1 or 2 very fine wires. Very fine wires. Of platinum or iridium. Platinum or iridium. They are gold in color. Not all of them are not all massive electrodes are in fact silver in color. There are some that I painted out there that are gold.
Those are the rare ones.
They're worth a lot more money. Also, they have a very special football-shaped electrode. All right, reach. Reach is a very, very important point here. The reach is the length of the threads that screw into the cylinder. Some cylinders require short reach. It's the design of the cylinder. They are about 1/2 inch deep, and then there's the long reach, which is about 13/16. You can see this one right here is a short or long reach. How about this one? How about this one? Long. What happens if you have a cylinder that was designed for a short reach and you install a long reach?
Smash.
Yes, you buy a new piston cylinder. If you're lucky, it won't cause too much damage. If you're not lucky, what will happen is the piston will come up, will beat the snot out of this. You will ruin the piston and beat this into the cylinder to the point where you can't get it apart.
Is that jack of threads up too, or threads?
Oh, absolutely. There's no getting it apart. It's not a big deal. You simply replace the cylinder. No. You simply replace the cylinder and the piston. And a cylinder piston change out, parts, you're only talking maybe 1,500, 2,000 in parts plus another 10 hours in labor. So it's just, and 2 new spark plugs. Actually, probably 8 because you're really messed up. Yeah.
So you just really replace with the one that you pull it off, right?
Well, I'm a big proponent in look at what you pulled out, but never assume it was right. In fact, if you're going to assume anything, assume the person before you did it wrong and verify. Always verify. It's not that it's that hard. There's such a big difference between these two. Just looking at a cylinder, you can tell. Cylinders are color coded. Oh, there we go. There's my color code. Some of them. This is Lycoming. Lycoming color codes it. So they have yellow here for a long reach and nothing for a short reach. But Continental doesn't. Oh, this is even a better one. So you just have to look. You can just tell by the depth of the threads. So these threads are very deep. These are very shallow. It's not hard to tell.
All those bells, stick your pinky in it.
Don't mess up.
Yeah, wouldn't the thread pitch be different though?
No. It's all 18 millimeter.
Seems like maybe that'd be a lot smarter to change the thread pitch, and so you couldn't screw.
They've been 18 millimeter for so long. Okay, then we have the shell threads. The shell threads, sorry, I got to keep going back. Shell threads are down here. These are the shell threads. And they're going to come in either 5/8 24 or 3/4 20. The bigger ones are often called high altitude. So what happens is you're unlike a car where you just snap them on. These are not snapped on. These are shielded plugs, so you screw them down on there. But that, of course, creates problems too. So shell threads. Shell threads. I'm going to talk about the other end first. This end down here. So 3/8 there. So I'm going to talk about these shell threads, not the harness end threads. So that is going to come in 18 or 14 millimeter. So even if you are working on a very antique World War II aircraft, they're still going to be millimeter. 14 millimeter in aircraft is rare. I maybe worked on 1 or 2 engines in my day that actually had 14 millimeter. I want to say Franklin's, maybe. So then we have the other end, which is terminal threads. This is the harness side. This is the harness side. And this is the side that gets the most damage. You either have 5/8 by 24 or the bigger ones, the 3/4 by 20-inch thread. And this is high altitude. I say high altitude, it's just bigger, nicer planes. A Cessna 150 is going to have the smaller ones. 182s and up are probably going to have the 3/4 inch. All right, the part number actually means something, and this is where we're getting into Justin's question here about heat. So designations. Let's take a look at, like, I could have a spark plug that's an RHM 37 Echo. So the R means it's a resistor. So that's resistor. Which almost all of them are resistor. And I won't get into the resistance range. Well, I can just tell you 500 to 3, according to your textbook, not Champion, 500 to 3,000 ohm is new, 500 to 5,000 good, 5,000 above no good, too hard to start. So you can't have too much. This is the H. This is the barrel style. The E is the 5/8 24, and the H is the big end, or the big size, 3/4 20, the high altitude. And then we get into the M. This is the mounting. So the B is 18 millimeter with the 3/16 inch. Is that the short or the long? Okay, and the M is 18 millimeter. We'll just put long reach. Long reach. Long reach. All right, this over here, the 37, this is the heat range. So I'll put low number. Low number is cold, and high number is hot. And we'll just do here, this one come down here. The E is electrode design. So the E happens to be a 2 electrode, massive. N would be 4 electrode, massive. Let me see. S would be single. S single. And B would be twin. So there's all different kinds, but that's what that is. All right. So back to heat rating. So what is this heat rating all about? When we talk about fuel systems, we're going to talk a lot about what fuel is made up of, the chemistry of that, and what happens inside of an aircraft engine. So one of the things about aircraft engines and the fuel we use as opposed to automotive fuel is there's a massive amount of lead inside of aircraft fuel. And the lead is there because we have very high octane fuel. So the normal fuel to use for piston engines is 100 octane. And the way you get this 100 octane, it's actually more of an anti-knock index, we call it octane, is from a lot of lead. And this lead creates all kinds of problems, especially at lower temperatures. I said we'll get into that later, but just so you know, let's see. Where's my ugly picture with my clinkers? There. So,
There's the football.
yeah, football with lead deposits and oil. This is what's pretty nasty. This engine here needs a lot of help. But this is normal to see. This is not a normal color. This is an engine that's got some bad rings. It's burning a lot lot of oil or a bad intake valve guide. But anyway, you get all this buildup right there. Let me see, what else do I have? No, we'll get other pictures. You get a lot of buildup of that. And if your spark plugs are running at a high enough temperature, it burns that stuff off. So you increase the temperature of the spark plug and you can burn this off. But if you increase the temperature of the spark plug too much, then it acts like a glow plug, and it's glowing and it's red, and it can pre-ignite the fuel. Then you get detonation, then you melt the piston. So you have to have this happy medium somewhere between not having a bunch of this stuff build up too much and not creating a glow plug on the other extreme. So the heat rating of the spark plug is the ability of it to transfer heat from here up through the threads into the cylinder and dissipate it out. I'm trying to do this in about 5 more minutes, so sorry. So I'm going to move this over, up. All right, so heat rating. Did I write heat rating yet? Heat rating. Heat rating. It's I for me. So is the measure of the spark plugs ability to transfer heat received from the combustion chamber to the cylinder. So the ideal temperature, is about 1,000 to 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's got to be cool enough, to not cause pre-ignition or act like a glow plug. What kind of engine has glow plugs?
Diesel.
Yeah. Breadstruck?
Yeah.
Okay.
At least you need a good.
But hot enough to resist accumulation of lead fouling deposits. In fact, the Cessna 152, that's the one with the Lycoming 0235 engine. For whatever reason, they're just horribly notorious for lead fouling. I don't know if it's the engine itself or if it's the usage, because 152s are prone to students who don't, and nothing against them, it's just, students don't always know how to manage the engine properly. But Lycoming has a service instruction that says, hey, basically, if you want to keep this thing from fouling out plugs, what you need to do, and I do it mine, I have a 150 with a Continental, but I do the same thing. So I fly, I land, I fill up, I go to the gas tanks, I fill up my tanks, I start it up, and it's really just it's a 1 minute taxi from right there around the corner, boom, I'm done. And so you're taxing, especially around a big airport, you tax at low RPM, the spark plugs get actually pretty cold at that point. Because you don't have that heat, then it's not using the chemicals properly that are designed to scavenge out the lead, so you end up getting these little balls, or we just call them clinkers. And so what Lycoming says is right before you shut down, bring the RPM up. Bring it up to a fairly decent high idle, high RPM, about 1,200 RPM, 1,500 RPM. Let it idle there for 30 seconds or so, I forget how long exactly, and then pull your mixture out and shut off. It's just a thing that I always do, and it seems to keep my plugs from fouling out. Because the problem is, you foul out a plug, then you have to take it out, then you have to clean it, sandblast it, which changes and wears a bit of the porcelain, which changes the heat rating. And I think it just causes this vicious cycle that happens over and over. And as far as selection of, okay, so now it's like this, well, it's all on you. You got to select the right heat range. Go too far one way and you're going to burn up the engine because it's detonating. Go far the other way and you're going to lose the engine in flight because, it really isn't like that. You're given a very narrow range of spark plug based on what is certified to go in the engine. So as a mechanic, this is the time when you actually you take out what it is, make sure that was approved to go in there, and just match the heat rating unless the owner's complaining. They're saying, man, this thing fouls plugs nonstop. I just can't not. Hey, well, maybe we'll go to one hotter if it's allowed in the manual. What do you think? Okay, we'll do that. So a couple of very important points about spark plugs. We'll have a little bit of time. All right, important points. I'm just going to hit the highlights. The highlights of, we'll call them the dirty, it's like the dirty dozen, but the commandments, if you will. All right. Use 2 wrenches to remove and install ignition harness, IGN harness. There are 2 flats. There's a flat here, which is part of the wire. It does not rotate. This rotates. Every single harness we have at this school is completely and totally destroyed in this area down to bare wire because mechanics, students, twist this with a single wrench, and as it's tightening, it twists this wire and it breaks right there. So if you're working on an actual area, please use a wrench here to hold it still and 1 wrench here to tighten. Rule 1. What was the else I going to say about that? There's got to be. I got my torque in it. Hang on here. I know there's something here. Oh, okay. So we'll just go at that point. The torque on here. So I was looking for the torque. It's like 1 flat. But I'll come back to that. Thought I had.
Yeah, what?
Huh?
Go back.
Go back.
to that. Go back to that.
What?
Video game.
Fortnite.
Fortnite?
I don't know. It is on Fortnite. Look at that. Because it was on YouTube, and so it cycled through a bunch of stuff. My kids watch a lot of Fortnite videos. Okay, so use 2 wrenches. Don't let them twist. So, all right, major point there. What's my other? Any side stress on a plug can crack the porcelain. Or ceramic, actually. It's ceramics. The ceramic core. So when you're putting a wrench or a socket on top of the spark plug, you have to hold it on straight up and down. Use 2 hands. Don't use one out here on the torque wrench. And please use a torque wrench, because if you put any kind of side load where the socket is down and you pull it, it just breaks the porcelain. You drop it, you bought it. If you drop a spark plug, it goes in the garbage because you broke the porcelain, the ceramic. That's a given fact. So if you're running around with the Fortnite game with a tray like that, this is only a 4-cylinder. You got a 6-cylinder, and you've got the fine wire in there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's 6, 12. And you've got the ceramic in there. How much money did you just lose? At least $100 per. So that's a minimum of $1,200.
Oh my God.
Don't drop them. I use both hands and I carry them very carefully.
They're like eggs.
Or better yet, I ask somebody else to carry it.
were an AMP, if someone like broke
He
stuff?
still is an AMP.
Well, but when you were working.
Yeah, what'd you hear? You were talking
Like,
FA?
if the mechanic messed up, does that come out of their pocket? Do you guys have like insurance for that?
I worked for a really cool boss, and he had a saying. He said, if you don't make a mistake from time to time, you're not doing anything. People are human. People make mistakes. If you make the same mistake twice, there's serious problems. A mistake once, no, never made anybody about it. But boy, you sure felt it. I mean, it's not a happy thing. All right, let's see. Well, there's so many things. I'm just out of time. Firing into wire brushing. All right, let me think. What else do I have to tell you? Okay.
You tell me.
Do not use unapproved blast media. This is probably the single biggest no-no I see out in the field, nonstop to this day. I believe they keep changing names. Not Champion, but their competitor. No. The name just slipped my mind. They have the best maintenance manual because they go into some great detail. But out in the field, ask anybody, how do you clean spark plugs? You take them out, you clean them in solvent, which you're not supposed to dump them in solvent. Then you put it in the glass bead booth and just glass bead all around it, and then you clean it, you gap it. Well, what happens with glass bead is there's actually a spot inside where the ceramic is next to the metal shell on the inside where the glass bead actually gets, and it sits in there and it doesn't come out. You can blow on it there all day long. It's embedded. Well, it's not embedded for long because when you take it and you put it inside the airplane and you screw it into the cylinder and you start up the aircraft and it gets up to speed, that glass melts out and goes into the engine. And glass inside of an engine is very abrasive. And so that's what most shops do. And this book tells you flat out, don't do it. This is what you're doing to the engine. So use the appropriate blast media that was designed to go in there. And probably one of my biggest pet peeves in aviation is this. You see this right here? That copper thing? It's called a gasket. What do you do with gaskets when you?
Flip them over.
I mean, not on my part.
All right, that's a gasket. That gasket costs about 40 cents. You are going to spend 2 years of your life, 1,900 hours trying to get your AMP plus $1,000 in testing to start your new career. It is not worth 40 cents to throw it all away. All maintenance manuals say do not reuse these. So do you reuse it? No. So you go to work for a shop and they're going to be, and I've seen them all the time. Oh, what are you, nuts? It's just screwing the customer there. We're going to anneal them. Now, annealing metal means that you heat it up and quench it and it returns the elasticity to it. Okay, that's fantastic. If you want to be a missionary maintenance person and you're working out in the middle of Africa and that's all you've got is the ability to anneal it or nothing, please take the time to anneal it and do your thing. But these are 40 cents. When I bought my aircraft, I said, okay, I'm doing my own maintenance on the aircraft. The very first thing I did is I went online and I bought a box of 100 of these things. Why do you do that? It's because I'm not going to reuse them. Right? And there is no data anywhere that tells me that I can anneal this. So don't throw your license. This is the kind of stupid stuff that just gets people. So I don't know. That's my lecture. That's
Is that your 40 cents?
that's my 40 cents worth. Times 4, so that's
How long does it take to anneal it
well,
properly?
Longer than it takes to replace them?
yeah, it takes more acetylene and man hours than it does.
That was my point.
Yeah, but people don't think that way. In fact, I worked at one shop where I was kind of reprimanded for, you're just trying to screw the customer. Am I really? By charging, an extra, what is 40
what is an
times
hourly shop rate for?
75, $100 an hour? So, all right. Oh man, let me see. I think you guys probably want to do some
You'll reuse.
All right, so do some reviews. So we'll shut this thing down, and that's it for this week.
What is